This is Mark Bell from SuperTraining.tv, Super Training Gym, the strongest gym in the West. Welcome to another edition of the Power Project. We got a long-winded question here from off of Facebook, off of the Super Training fan page. If you're not a fan, please go on there and become a fan. Subscribe, or you can subscribe to my Facebook page, which is Mark Bell Super Training. I can't take any more friends, but you can subscribe on there. Let's see. So this one's from Gerard De Villeries Kempman, something like that. And his question is a great question here. He's a raw lifter, squats about double body weight, deadlifts about 2.5 times his body weight. So a pretty strong guy, making a lot of progress. He's only been doing the conjugate system for 7 months, the West Side Barbell program. And his question is, can he replace box squats with pause squats? And kind of if so, where should he mix them in and blah, blah. He also says that he's done a lot of research and he's never really found anything to address some of these particular issues. One of the reasons why you haven't seen anything, talking about some of these issues is, there's probably two reasons. One reason is you probably don't have a subscription to Power Magazine. So subscribe to thepowermagazine.com. We have tons of information in there, every single issue about raw training as well as geared training. But a lot of you raw guys out there feel like you need a little special boost from your fellow raw lifters, and we have some of the strongest raw lifters in the world communicating on how to become a more efficient lifter, a better lifter, a stronger lifter. And another reason why you haven't seen a lot of information on it is because the guys that you're talking about don't really deal with, the guys that you're talking about using as a resource, they don't really deal with raw lifters. Louie Simmons has a team of power lifters, and they compete in certain federations, and nearly every single one of them competes in gear. I am not by any means saying that they're weak without their gear, because these are very, very strong athletes. They're the strongest and the best in the world. All I'm saying is that they don't directly deal with raw lifters that often. And so some of these issues, when they pop up, they become a little bit complicated. Because like you said, there's not a ton of information out there. So what do we do about it? You feel like you don't like box squats. Now, one thing I would say about box squats is that a lot of times when people don't feel like they're getting much from them, there's a couple of reasons why. Reason number one might be maybe you don't get a ton from dynamic effort work. Sometimes that happens. Some athletes they just don't get a ton from the dynamic effort work. So sometimes the stimulus is not great enough. A lot of raw lifters I know don't use the dynamic effort work. They don't use the dynamic effort method. Now, that doesn't mean that box squats are bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that dynamic effort is bad. It may mean that it might not be that great for you, and it might not be that great for you to use 52 weeks out of the year, which is normally what's prescribed. So instead, you might want to look into some different options there. But the other thing about a box squat is I see so many people doing it wrong. I see so many people doing the box squat improperly, and that will affect the carryover tremendously. Also, though, the difference between a box squat and a regular squat, the amount of I don't know what the word would be for it, but basically a raw squat. If you were to do a raw squat, it's going to beat you up a lot more than a box squat. So a box squat is easier to recover from. So again, you could utilize it as a tool somewhere in your training. Might not mean that you use it all the time, especially because you said you didn't like it. But in terms of the pause squat's a great squat, but you don't necessarily need to do a pause squat. A pause squat's a great assistance movement, has some pretty good carryover. It could even be done with kind of the repetition effort method You can utilize it in some different ways. Max effort, maybe. I don't know. I don't think it's that great of a max effort movement. I think it's more of a repetition effort method type movement. It could be used on dynamic day, just as you suggested, or you could just do regular squats on your dynamic day without the box. I mean, it really doesn't matter. But what I suggest to you first thing I would do is raise your percentage on your dynamic day and lower your sets a little bit. Instead of the traditional 8 sets of 2, try like 5 sets of 3. Change it up a little bit. Try 5 sets of 3. Also, another alternative to squatting onto a box is to squat into chains. You may or may not have that option, but guys that use monolifts have that option. You could kind of set something up out of a rack if you needed to, but that might be a little bit awkward. But squatting down to chains, you'd be shocked, is way different than squatting onto a box. Although there is still a pause and a restart and everything like that, it takes a lot of strength in your back to be able to do that exercise. So that's a good exercise. Your other question is, where should you put your pause squats? And I mentioned that briefly. You're wondering if you can do it as a max effort movement. Should you use it, or should it be more like an assistance movement exercise? I would say it's an assistance movement exercise. I would do something off a box first. Is my recommendation. It's what I feel would be great. What I feel would work well for you. And then after that, I'd hit up those pause squats. So again, it could be on dynamic day, it could be on max effort day. It doesn't really matter what day it's on. I'm not a fan of squatting twice a week. I'm not a big proponent of it. Once a week should be sufficient. If you're training hard and working hard, you shouldn't have to squat more than once a week. The pause squats can be really beneficial. You're going to want to pause it for a little bit down there, about 3 to 5 seconds in the hole, and make sure you're using good form, and make sure that you're trying to fire out of the hole the best you can. That's kind of the whole purpose of the pause squat. Trying to make sure I answered everything that you said there. Just my background with working with some raw lifters, I've had the opportunity to work with the strongest, or one of the strongest raw lifters of all time, Stan Efferding, and these are some of the methods that he has utilized. He does squat with bands, he does squat with chains, he does squat off of a box. The other thing about box squatting is you can lower your box squat height a little bit, and that might be something that would help. But Stan doesn't really do a ton of dynamic effort work necessarily, but he does like to get in good clean sets, and he likes to build momentum that he'll build upon from one week to the next, not just 10 or 20 pound increments, but he'll do something fairly light for a few weeks. He'll build up some speed, some explosive power. Again, it's not necessarily speed work. He doesn't really pick a percentage. He just picks a weight, and he does a couple doubles with it, and then the next week he just goes heavier. So he kind of simplifies it for himself, and that's what you need to do, because you said here that you follow a lot of advice from Elite and a lot of advice from Louie Simmons, and there's some great coaches out there on Elite, and Louie Simmons is the best, but you want to follow your own advice. You want to create your own advice, and ultimately that's what's going to make you better. And that is it from supertraining.tv. Later.